What's up, y'all? It's so crazy because I started to go live actually at first from my phone, and I realized that for 2025, I actually want to start recording on my laptop. So let's get in a little closer, and I give y'all the same view I give for behind the mic. Let's get the lighting set up so y'all can see this is a real deal production. We do these things live. We do these things live. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining me for my live. Today is the podcast rundown where I go over podcasts that I think are cool enough for you all to know about. There are a lot of podcasts out right now, and what I try to do is make that easier for folks to find. Like, you know, the try to call out the pods that are really cool. That's just basically what I'm here to do at this point. That is what I am here to do. So for me, I've never actually gone live from my computer. It's interesting. Oh, you can share your screen. I might have to use that on a later date. I'm not prepared to use that right now, though. So we will not be doing that today, actually. Anyway, so for the folks that here that are now tapped in for the first time, this is my channel. Welcome to the channel. This is ICN Indie Creative Podcast. Oh Lord. Wow, I'm gonna have to cut that one out. But yeah, this is Indie Creative Podcast. I'm the icn.dj. I felt that cough coming and still coughed anyway. We're gonna start a poll here, and that poll is gonna say, "Are you subscribed?" So this is a lot easier than working on mobile. And I'll probably just be going live this way moving forward. Plus, it's easier for me when it comes to like editing and stuff because when I'm editing, I don't have to focus on turning the video or getting it a certain way. I can just shoot it right the first time. So anyway, on the podcast rundown, which is what today's live is about, what I do is I highlight trending podcasts that I think are cool enough for you all to know about. And I have quite a few on my list today. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 podcasts to highlight today. So I'm gonna tell you off rip. Most of these shows you'll be able to find at listen.revolt.tv. One more time, that's listen.revolt.tv. You can find 99% of these podcasts on that platform. Where you can find the other 1%, you actually even see some crossover as well too. You'll be able to find some of our shows on icn.dj, which is our website and is for the brand that we are on live for right now. But if you all know anything about me, I play a dual role. I am the owner of the Indie Creative Network, Indie Creative Podcast. I am the ICN DJ. On the flip side, I'm the community manager for Revolt Podcast Network. So, I use this live to promote their podcast and promote my podcast as well too. So, wow, speaking of that, actually, my podcast, how did I come up with a full list of 10 shows, now 11, and didn't highlight my own podcast? Insane. So, yeah, so I have 11 podcasts to go over today. If you are new here, make sure that you all fill out the poll. Are you subscribed? Yes or no? If you are subscribed, click yes. If you're not subscribed, go get subscribed and come back and click yes. So, first things up, we are going to start with Boss Babe Reset. So, Boss Babe Reset was a podcast that actually used to be called Behind the Silk. That podcast is now called Boss Babe Reset. I actually had a chance to sit down and talk to that host, Erica Parker. She said, don't call her government no more. Anyway, Erica Nicole had a chance to sit down and talk with her for this week's episode. Well, no, for next week's episode, depending on when you listen to this. Say January 17th, just to date it. So on Monday's coming episode of Behind the Mic, I'm talking to Erica Nicole, host of Boss Babe Reset podcast. But yeah, so she had to rebrand. She started to rebrand in the beginning of this year. Well, actually, technically started to rebrand in December, but new episodes came out in the beginning of this year, and she's hitting y'all. One, two, three. She got episode 80, 81, and 82 out already. And I just love like her passion. Like she has her own business called Silken Co., which kind of focuses on healthcare, well, face skincare, excuse me. But and when it relates to like the air quality and stuff like that. So for her, all I feel like everything about her is very like spiritually based, religious based. She just cares about people in a very authentic way. I can like just get that off of her persona. So the episode titles that have come out, actually she dropped them all on the 13th of January. So episode 80 is called Wellness Stacking, the self-care hack every high achiever needs. So if you are a high achiever or someone that works, a lot of hours, you should definitely listen to that one. So that's episode 80. Episode 81 is called Is Work Life Balance Even Real? How am I balancing hustle culture, entrepreneurship, and married life? Now, I'm not married, but I do have a long term partner. I hustle all the time, and entrepreneurship is not just my life, but both of our lives. So, for me, this is another great episode to watch. If you saw my lives from December, I talked a lot about having a hard time with like work life balance with everything in my life being around podcasting. Um, but yes, that's definitely an episode to check out. And then episode 82, remember all these dropped on January 13th. So for the podcast rundown, I only talk about shows that came out within this last week. So you have an opportunity to go and check these out, and they'd be nice and fresh and not old episodes. And then, so episode 82 is called Stop Feeling Like the Bad Guy, Setting Boundaries and Navigating Conflict as a Boss Babe. Because if you know anything about, you know, running a business or just even being a human, you have to say no at some points in time. You have to say no. And that ends up, most people who are very proficient in saying no get deemed a bad guy for not just doing the thing that people want them to do or not subscribing to the way that they subscribe. So if any of those things I just mentioned are aligned with you, I would definitely check out Boss Babe Reset. You can find that podcast on listen.revolt.tv, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Now, next up on the list here, we have Bag Fuel Podcast. This podcast is hosted by Esso and Heineken, two New Yorkers. This crazy because they had their own little viral moment this week because they were on. I didn't know any of this, so I'm learning all this like as it's happening. So apparently, Esso and Heineken used to be on a podcast with this guy named Matt Hoffa. And Esso and Heineken, collectively as Bag Fuel, were getting interviewed by Lip Service, which is a podcast hosted by Angela Yee. And she might have a co host, but sorry, co host, I don't know your name. But in any event, they were on that show, and Matt Hoffa, who they obviously have issues with, decided to come on the podcast, and it seemed like a setup. But anyway, long story short, that was a big social media clip. Definitely check that one out. If you just go on Twitter, formerly known as X, if you all know me, that's my thing. If y'all go on Twitter, formerly known as X, you will see that clip. Just search the hashtag Esso or Heineken or Bag Fuel. Anyway, on their episode this week, they ooh, see, it's what I get to talk about people. Anyway, their episode this week, they interviewed Esteban. He joined the show to share his story of transformation after serving time in prison. Check that one out. If you are a lover of Bag Fuel podcast. Next up, we got Carefree Black Girl podcast. Now, I'm a little biased because that's a podcast that I work on. But this week we released our live show. So last week Thursday, again dating this live. Last week Thursday, we had a live episode at Be Social here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Shout out to Be Social. Shout out to Carefree Black Girl. Shout out to Leslie, Latrice, Phoenix Lux, Quanah Mac, and everybody involved with the Carefree Black Girl team. We had an amazing live show, vision board party, and just overall vibe. In any event, that live so special, that episode went out on Tuesday. You can find that episode on our YouTube channel. On their first off, on their YouTube channel. So just search hashtag Carefree Black Girl, or you can go to our YouTube channel. They actually have a playlist bar. I don't know what you would call it, but on our homepage, there's a playlist for Carefree Black Girl season 10. Check it out. It's the first one up there. Anyway, so on this episode, Quanah, producer of Carefree Black Girl podcast, Leslie and Phoenix Lux, they had a conversation about the state of women rap. So check that one out. They also talked about non-traditional dating, how millennials and Gen Z kind of look at dating and sexuality just in a more fluid perspective. And then they played a fun game where we were able to interact with the crowd. Did a We did a small session, let's call it that, of Bop or Not. We focused it on Charlotte's food, nightlife, and dating scene. So that one was really cool. Definitely check out that episode of Carefree Black Girl podcast. Actually is doing numbers on YouTube right now. So for the votes that's just popping in here right now, the three podcasts I highlighted so far were Boss Babe Reset, Bag Fuel, and Carefree Black Girl podcast. You can find all of those podcasts on all the favorite podcast platforms, YouTube, and listen.revolt.tv. If you go into Apple Podcasts and type in Revolt, you will see like their channel. Carefree Black Girl podcast is up there. Definitely check that one out. So next up on my list, we have Can We Talk R&B podcast. This podcast is hosted by Ian Vaughn, based in the New Orleans area, or Nolans for the folks down there. And on this episode, he interviewed Mac Ayres. They had an exciting and engaging conversation around music authenticity, artistic growth, and the soul-stirring power of R&B in today's musical landscape. So definitely check that episode out. Shout out to Ian Vaughn, just holding it down for the R&B community. Not only is he just an honest R&B connoisseur and R&B historian, but he also is really supporting the R&B community in a way, and in a time where it hasn't been highlighted. So definitely want to shout him out as well. So we have a lot of shows on our Revolt Podcast Network that I would consider as edutainment. Edutainment. Shout out to my boy Devin Wingfield for that verbiage there. So one of our edutainment podcasts is called Untitled Africans, and on their latest episode, it's actually titled "We Are Burnt Out." And it's crazy because, 2025 just started, but on this episode, they discussed can't read today. They discussed the exhausting cycle that is burnout and toxic productivity. Now, if y'all are noticing the trend here, Boss Babe Reset also kind of focused on that one too. So on the episode of Untitled Africans, they're looking back on what worked, what didn't work, and how they can leave this level of exhaustion in 2024. So, when it comes down to like podcast production and like developing a show, you're going to start noticing some trends. You have to really figure out where's your audience mentally at during this time of the year. So off rip, Boss Babe Reset, Untitled Africans, they both are kind of in that mindset of folks, not wanting to repeat what they did in 2024. Coming into the new year with new goals, new plans, like trying to set just new tactics and new Wow, the word I'm looking for is not there. Anyway, then a new rhythm, basically. So, with that being said, love Untitled Africans for doing this. They also talk about work-life balance on this episode, so be sure to check that one out. Now, for my folks, them who from the Southeast United States, from the dirty South, as they call it out here. We have a show based out in Atlanta called The Progress Report. And on the latest episode of The Progress Report, they actually had Webby's son, Trey Savage, on the recent episode. And, you know, these young rappers, man, these young rappers. Who's, anyway, he had a controversial statement about rappers rapping over the age of 30. And I just don't agree with. I can't agree with it. But that has been making some rounds on the social web. So if you want to check that one out, definitely check out this episode of the Progress Report. But gonna read the description here. Webby's okay, so Baton Rouge artist Trey Savage makes his second appearance on the Progress Report. He talks about his latest project, I Ain't Have Nothing But a Dream, getting exclusive vocals from the late Lil Fat, hardships from being Webby's son, and rapping, because, people be having those expectations for you, especially if your father is a successful, well-known rapper. Upcoming joint projects with Webby and Boosie's son Tootie Raw. Meeting Boosie for the first time, dreams of becoming an actor, fatherhood, and just first learning how when he would be a father. And then dream collabs that he had with Nipsey Hussle and Michael Jackson, which in 2025, folks we finding ways. Folks we finding ways. So check that one out. That again you can find on all of your favorite podcast platforms. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio. You can also find it on YouTube and listen.revolt.tv. Next up on my list is a new podcast that we actually have that joined in the winter class. Our winter class launched on January the 8th. Shout out to them. So it's really only been about 9 days. And a new show I want to call out right now is So when you look at their artwork, it says FQ, crazy, sexy, cool, but it really stands for Femme Queen, crazy, sexy, cool. So the Femme Queen, crazy, sexy, cool podcast, season 1, episode 2 features Iconic, aka Nikki, is the overall mother of the International House of Juicy Couture. Now, if y'all are not tapped into ballroom culture, let me tell you something. Asia, Tabitha, and Temptress are gonna put you on. They're gonna put you on. So again, listen.revolt.tv, Femme Queen, Crazy Sexy Cool, FQ, Crazy Sexy Cool. Definitely check that podcast episode out. This is only episode 2 of season 1. But if y'all want to jump ahead and catch more recent episodes, you can search for their YouTube channel. They have a very successful YouTube channel on here, and they just wrapped up season 3. Cool, y'all. We powering through this list today. So next up on my list, we got Holding Court. Now, Holding Court is one of the inaugural podcasts that have been on the Revolt Podcast Network since 2022. So I would love to take this opportunity to shout out Big Court and his daughter, Rachel Renee, for really taking their podcast to the next level. But on this episode of Holding Court, they interviewed BB Drake. Now this is part not to be confused with Drake or Aubrey Drake or Aubrey Drake Graham. We're talking about BB Drake, who got her first acting job working on The Good Times and working with Richard Pryor. So it says part 1 here, so this is probably quite a lengthy interview. Let me just pop through here. So this interview is about an hour, meaning that the part 2 could potentially be about that as well too. But let's read the description. So BB Drake made her Broadway debut in 1975, a Leslie Lee's play, The First Breeze of Summer, and the following year appeared in Great Performances productions. She later was a regular cast on the two short-lived sitcoms Snip and Sanford Arms. But more so what we would know her for, as I stated already, was The Good Times. But let's pop through here. So during her career, Drake appeared in more than 70 films and television series. She made her big screen debut in 1975, appearing in films Report to the Commissioner and Friday Foster. And in 1977, had a supporting role opposite Richard Pryor in the comedy film Which Way Is Up. In 1979, she co-starred in the miniseries Backstairs at the White House and the made-for-television movie The Cracker Factory, which is a crazy title, mind you. Anyway, she made guest starring appearances on television series such as Good Times, which I already mentioned, Welcome Back, Cotter, The Love Boat, The Jeffersons, Highway to Heaven, 30 Something, LA Law, The Jamie Foxx Show, The Steve Harvey Show, Parenthood, and The Bernie Mac Show. Like classics. Classics. You know, listen to this episode of Holding Court. They are going to be going down a line of history that y'all may never have been put on. So tap into that one. We got our final three pods right here. So one podcast I'm going to highlight right now is the G Code with Adri V. Now, y'all, I'm still getting tapped into the amazing soul that is of Adri V. But Adri V, she get it popping. She upstate New York, they're out in Buffalo, but she definitely get it popping. On this episode, she interviews Jamarcus Ingram, who is a Buffalo Bills NFL player. She uncovers an incredible journey that takes him from high school student to professional NFL athlete. Check out that episode. He also went to University of Buffalo as well too. So it's all tied in. It's all tied in. It's all tied in. So you can check out the G Code podcast with Adri V, ADRI V, on all podcast platforms. That again is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, because YouTube, that's where we at. We gotta, highlight YouTube. You can find it on YouTube as well too, and listen.revolt.tv. Cool. So next up, I love highlighting the twins because it's like, when you got twins, how do you not highlight the twins? How do you not highlight twins in general? They're just so easy to highlight. Anyway, so on this episode of Paging Dr. Shonda, Dr. Shonda brings on Journey Montana, an R&B artist, to talk about just, their healing journey, and trying to find that inner child. Not sure if anyone has ever had opportunity to explore like their inner child or go do the Googles on what an inner child is and how you can find that. But I promise you, if you do that, go and sit in a tub of water and really like lock in on your inner child, that 7, 8 year old, and find out what they want to do. Oh man, tapped in. Anyway, so you can listen to Dr. Shonda on Thursdays every week at Revolt Podcast Network. She's also available on Fox Soul on Thursdays at 6 p.m. if you are in the DMV area. And last, we always got to say the best for last. Or at least I'm going to say the best for last. On this episode of Behind the Mic podcast, powered by Revolt Podcast Network, I, your host, Wise Grisette, had an opportunity to do an interview with Nina of the First Gems podcast. Now, I love this interview because Nina is just such a amazing soul. Like her personality is just so bubbly. She really is really cool, not gonna lie. And she just talks about like how her tight-knit Nigerian American family, how that experience was able to help her create this podcast called The First Gens, which she coincidentally does with her cousins. So it's just like it's just amazing. Like if y'all caught my live on Monday, I just kind of talked about what it would be like if me and my cousins end up doing a podcast, and I could only imagine or just hope that it would be as great as the First Gens podcast. So again, Behind the Mic podcast, Behind the Mic podcast, Behind the Mic Power by Revolt podcast network. Search for that on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube and on Spotify. You can listen on all your favorite platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and wherever you get your podcasts. Well, with that being said, y'all, I just want to say thank you again for tapping into the podcast rundown. Today is January 17th, 2025. Y'all, we are a quarter of the year. Wow, we are a quarter of the way through the century. Incredible. Anyway, my name is Wise Grisette. You all can find me at The Real Wise, Wize. That is on Instagram, and that is on Twitter, formerly known as X. I'm internationally known on the microphone as Wiz, Wizzy, and Wise. And I'm out, y'all. Catch you on the next live.